Yeah, hi guys. Got another cracker of a day here, central Victoria. Nights are cold, but the days can be beautiful. Sunny, blue skies, crisp. So I thought I'd come out to the sunroom, or the sun hall. We got Chloe joining us today. That's Chloe. She got a bird last night. I think it was already dead, actually. It was a beautiful green, emerald green parrot. I think she found the body had been hit by a car, and I think she brought it to our back step and disassembled it to see what made it tick. And yeah. Alright, so we're going to continue the topic of addiction. My addiction, maybe your addiction. So the first episode was the beginnings, which were not unlike a lot of other kids, you know. Yeah, look, we all experiment as young people, and we all, well, I'm speaking generally, but most of us don't have any concept of the world beyond us. We're egocentric. So, but yeah, those signs that I pointed out in the last episode tell me now I had an issue with alcohol and drugs very early on. So my default settings, and here's a catchphrase. I think every time we use a catchphrase or a key phrase, we'll hear a ding. My default setting is I'm restless, I'm irritable, and I'm discontented. So restlessness comes across in I can't decide what to watch on TV. I don't know if I want to go out. I don't want to stay home. I get to a party, it's no good. I want to go to the next nightclub, get to that club, it's no good. Wonder why I left the party. I'm irritable. Small things can make me real grumpy. And it's always someone else's fault. And discontented, I see what others have got and I think, you know, why can't I have that? So that's my default setting, and that is, you know, you hear it said that before I ever took an alcoholic drink, key phrase, I was an alcoholic before I ever took a drink. So I had a problem. We went to that schoolyard in Weir Street. I had a problem with my shyness and my feeling of isolation. And when I found alcohol, it solved my problem. Alcohol was my solution until it turned on me. So let's have a summary. So we left off last time. I was still rabbiting on for a while after the, video finished. I don't want to make it too long, but so my situation in my mid-20s, I've got a job in IT. In the early days of IT, in 1979, I got a job through my brother-in-law as a computer operator in one of these big rooms that had spinning tapes. Sometimes you see them in 1950s sci-fi movies. Spinning tapes and printouts and punch cards. But it paid pretty well, you know. And so by, you know, I was a 20-year-old working in the IT industry, which made me feel real intelligent and real, you know, pretty good about myself. So here's another catchphrase. I had an inflated ego with a low sense of self-worth. So the guys I hung around with, they were motor mechanics, panel beaters, carpenters, and I made out like I'd been to university or something. I didn't. I got to year 12 and they gave me a complimentary pass because they felt sorry for me. But yeah, I played on that. So I worked in the IT industry, just to give you some concept, and I earned good money because in 1980 I took myself to England on a holiday to see where my dad was born and catch up with relatives in England. He was born in Doncaster, by the way, in Yorkshire. So yeah, I had friends that we were like the gang out of Friends or Happy Days. You know, there was a group of us and girls that hung around with us. They came, they went, but the core group of us, we shared houses, me and Steve and Chris and a guy called Doug. And they were all guys that didn't really have any responsibility either. They didn't pay parking fines, speeding fines. Steve used to drive around without a license. And they certainly at that stage weren't looking to buy houses and have picket fences and families and all that. So in that case, and occasionally they would fuck up. They'd drink too much, or they'd smash the car or do something stupid. But they seemed to know when to call it quits. Whereas at the end of the night, I wanted to keep going. The worst thing I could hear was, "That's it, the party's winding up." I wanted to go, all night. So that was my thing. Another catchphrase: when I took a drink, I couldn't stop. But I didn't know that then. So some of those guys, Chris, for instance, he was playing in rock bands. He was a bass player. His brother played in Rose Tattoo. Some of you guys might know that fantastic Aussie band. His big brother was the guitarist in Rose Tattoo, Rob Riley. Said I wasn't going to use names. Anyway, so yeah, he was playing around Melbourne, so we used to go and see his band a lot. So that's where I was introduced to speed. But we were always smoking pot. And I still have a fondness for pot. I haven't smoked it for over 10 years. It didn't really do me wrong, although it fucked up my lungs. You can hear me breathing when I walk up a hill or whatever. But I recognise now it was a drug and I used it like alcohol, but I don't smoke it now because I don't want to take a risk with my sobriety. If I get into weed, I'm going to start telling lies. My husband, he doesn't smoke weed, so what am I going to do? Sit and giggle to myself? So let's look at some addiction factors here. So I'm going to put them up on the side. This doesn't mean you're an alcoholic or you're born to be an alcoholic, but these seem to be factors that contribute. One is genetic. Well, we mentioned in the last episode, my mum's brothers, these guys were off fighting the Japanese in the Pacific War. They were having nightmares. Not all of them were alcoholic, but a couple of them were. They were alcoholics of the hopeless kind. So there's genetics. A predisposition to addiction. Okay, so we mentioned last time my shyness, my incredible shyness. Alcohol and drugs could bring me out of myself and make me the life of the party. A childhood trauma. I mentioned that my mum was killed in the car accident when we went to South Africa to live, and I'll put a link to the episode where I tell you about the day mum died in that car accident. I was in the back seat, and yeah, that was a childhood trauma, but I'm not even convinced that made me an alcoholic. I think even if that hadn't happened, I would have turned out to be an alcoholic. But it's a factor, right? And then repeated actions. If you do something often enough, and I drank and I drugged thousands and thousands of times, and I made bad decisions. I took risks when I drank and drugged. If you said to me, hey, why don't we put on some balaclavas and we've sawn off shotguns and we'll go rob that bottle shop down there, I probably would have said, yeah, okay, let's give it a go. I was just lucky that the people I hung around with didn't get into real criminal enterprises, and we didn't get into heroin, I'll say that, although I had no aversion to trying heroin if it had been offered to me. So the elephant in the room. Ding! So a couple of episodes back, I talked to you guys about my trip to Africa in 1986, when I was going to hitchhike from Egypt all the way down to Cape Town. It didn't happen because of that irritable, discontented business that I mentioned earlier. I got to Aswan in Egypt. I was hungover. I had to wait 5 days for the next leg of the journey. That was too much for me, and I was irritable, and I just got the train back and I flew down to Kenya. I still had a great time, but I didn't get to do what I wanted to do, and I've regretted that always. But anyway, in that diary that I kept, is day after day of entries about hangovers, getting horribly drunk. I was sleeping on floors in dormitories. I remember sleeping on the floor of a dormitory once where someone had written "Beware of bed bugs" on the wall, and I slept on the floor so to avoid the bed. They were hovels, and yet I could go and spend inordinate amounts of money out of my budget on getting pissed and snorting flour in Nairobi, which I was told was coke. So, and then there is an entry where I mention at the end of the book that my sexuality was all screwed up and that I was going to go and see a faith healer when I got back. That's the elephant in the room. So yeah, I was going to see counsellors, psychologists, psychiatrists. I don't remember the faith healer, but I would never have seen what my problem was. I would have I had a broken heart because of the Greek girl that dumped me. That went on for years, and I was horribly confused about my sexuality. I guess I'm bisexual, but I've never really looked at it. I liked girls, but my deep dark secret, I liked guys as well, but I couldn't tell any of my friends, and I couldn't tell, because they were all homophobes, and I couldn't tell my family because I didn't want them to judge me. Just hold on there. Yeah, potatoes were boiling. And I was too ashamed to tell my family and all that. That deserves a separate episode. Where the fuck did this shame about my sexuality ever come into the equation? It has to be that Catholic school where you saw me wandering around. And in particular, a guy called Father O'Finnessy from Northern Ireland. Homosexuality as a sin, in his big booming Irish voice. But anyway, let's not drift off topic. So that was put in me from an early age about, but here's the go, right? It doesn't matter if you're bisexual, homosexual, heterosexual, as long as you love the person and you respect them. And, you're both adults and you know what you're doing. But yeah, that was my deep, dark secret. And that's why I saw psychiatrists and psychologists, because of this. I would wake up in the morning ashamed and full of guilt and remorse. Another key one, bing, for what I'd done the night before in a drunken blackout, driving my car around all hours of the night looking for sex with guys. So I'd book a psychiatrist, and then it'd be 3 weeks before I could get in to see the guy. When I get there, he'd say, well, how can I help you today? And I'm trying to remember why I rang him. The other thing was the broken heart business with the Greek girl. Yeah, I cried bucket loads of tears over her and Brian, the guy I'm with now. And I think, why the hell? If someone doesn't want to be with you, that's their loss, not mine. I'm a good person, I had stuff to offer, but it didn't work out with the Greek lady. But we're still friends, and I've got to say, I always have a soft spot for her, and I know she does for me, but it just didn't work out. But it didn't deserve years of crying. But that wasn't why I drank. And that's what I couldn't tell the psychiatrists or the doctors. I couldn't be honest and tell them how much I was drinking. And furthermore, I couldn't do anything about it. The concept of the idea of living a life without alcohol or drugs, it just didn't seem like worth living, I've got a few things here. So that was the elephant in the room, was alcoholism. So at the height of my drinking, and now we're looking at, say, I went to India in 1990. By the time I got back, I was drinking every day. India was a bit of a break from the booze, but there was fantastic drugs in India, hash and opium. We'll do an episode on my trip to India. But when I got back here, back to the share house, so daily drinking had become a thing. Morning drinking when I could get away with it. Sometimes I'd go to work and I would have been ironing my shirts with a coffee cup. I was classy. A coffee cup of red wine next to the ironing board. And my biggest fear was, someone saying, and occasionally it happened, they'd say, have you been drinking? In the morning. If you're an alcoholic, you should be woohoo, like Homer Simpson. He says beer isn't only for breakfast. And so yeah, there was that horror, that fear as well, that shame that my secrets would be found out, that I was an alcoholic. Yeah, and I had like a medicine kit in the car. I was smoking weed. I was staying up all hours of the night. Getting guys off the internet to come and see me. I discovered ecstasy. I was staying up all night is what I'm getting at, and then I was going to IT the next morning. I still had nail polish on, I still had heavy black mascara that I'd worn the night before, and used to wear these skin tight pants. Someone said my crotch looked like a baby gripping an apple. And I had real bleached blonde hair, like that bass player from U2. I tried living with a lady about that time. She was a fantastic woman. She was a white witch, and her house was real witchy, you know, but in a good way. She didn't, like me now, she didn't mind spider webs and that. But yeah, she was a social drinker, and I thought she could fix my problem. I thought she could fix me and make me, force me to drink socially like a normal person. And that was never going to work, so I just started hiding the stuff around the house, hiding bottles in the hedge, or she had incredible hearing. She could hear me open a can of beer from the back of the house, you know, in the bedroom. She could hear me. But what that did show me, I was going to mention before this, the medicine kit I had in the car, because I'd be up all night. I'd have to go to work. I'd need eye drops because my eyes were red. Big cans of underarm spray. I'd be drinking gallons of strong black coffee at work. I'd be sweating like a lunatic, and the anxiety attacks, the panic attacks were kicking in, and and mints to chew to try and disguise it on your breath. That's ridiculous. Anyway, I lived with this lady for a while, and she was a beautiful spiritual woman, and I was a lunatic. I was a bully. It wasn't physical, but I bullied her, and I regret that to this day. I'm just going to stop for a moment. Brian's home. I need to talk to him. I'll get back to you. Stop recording. Yes, I moved out of that relationship because it was shining a mirror on me. I say this, that I thought I was a peace-loving hippie, into Crosby, Stills and Nash and smoking a joint every now and then, but that was the furthest thing from the truth. Almost every morning I'd wake up and vomit because I'd smoke bongs. As soon as she went out with the dog for a walk, I'd lay in bed and hear the front door click as she went out to walk the dog. I knew I had 20 minutes, and I'd race out of bed, smoke bongs and throw up outside of a window. Sometimes there was an occasion I started vomiting blood. Convinced myself it was red wine from the night before, but went to see the doctor. This is how I think, right? Maybe you do too if you got this far. So gone to see the doctor, and he said you've got a bleeding stomach ulcer, and you got to go to the hospital, and they're going to shove this camera down your throat, And he said there'll be really strong sort of sedatives used, so you need someone to pick you up from the hospital, and don't drink any alcohol, he said. Well, that put the light bulb on. So of course I took a day off work, which was always fantastic. My work record at this stage, we're in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? It was terrible. The end of my times in IT was some of the most distressing, painful periods of my life. But anyway, so anytime I could get a day off, I took it. So I go in the hospital to have this thing. So I changed the batteries. I was telling you about this day that I went to have the stomach ulcer thing done, right? So I'm sat in this waiting room. There were swinging doors, so the nurse would come out and say, "You're next." They call the guy next to me. He goes in. About 15 minutes later, they bring him out of the other swinging door, and the nurse is holding his arm, and he sits down. They offer you a cup of tea. They offered him a cup of tea. He looked like a zombie, and I'm thinking, this is fantastic. Get me out of here straight afterward. I want to hit the pub. I want to combine alcohol with this stuff, which is kind of what I did. They took some convincing that my grandmother was down in the car park of the hospital, couldn't use the stairs and the elevator, but I was going to go and she was going to drive me home, which is all shit, of course. I went straight to the pub and started drinking on top of this anaesthetic stuff they gave me, which wasn't as good as my mind made it out to be. At some stage in that time, I think I was always looking for a solution to my problem. I was introduced to eckies, bickies, they call them in Australia. And I just took to them like a duck on water, because I found that I could go out and I didn't feel the need to drink alcohol. I could drink water and dance. Got right into nightclubbing, I was nearly 40, and hitting the clubs. There was a club called Q-Bar in Paran. It was downstairs, and I went there. It made me real extravagant. The eckies made me real over the top, I suppose. I'd always been a bit of a flashy dresser, but I was walking around wearing little crop tops with Union Jack on it, the spiky blonde hair, the reflective shades, skin tight dance pants. And we'd gone to this club when with a group of friends, and these two, they were like twins, they were like Swedish twins, came up and asked me would I come and meet the owner of the Q-Bar. So I went over, thought I was in trouble, and he offered me straight away VIP membership. He said, "You're the sort of person we want here." So he gave me this tag, which got me in any time. I didn't have to stand in line. I said, "What about my friends?" And he goes, "Nah, they've got to put the application in. I can only offer it to you." So I started hanging out at this Q-Bar. It was open every night. Sometimes I'd be there at 4 or 5 in the morning. I kind of gave up drinking then because I was on the pills. I'd sell them, and with the profits I could sort of take some myself. But yeah, people were always coming up to me at the club because I looked like a tripper. I had a dance suit made, looks like cat suit, stretchy cat suit with fluorescent stripes, a hood, gothic black, and the symbol, the white circle with a cross through it, like the zodiac symbol. But that seemed to be my solution. But I was taking ecstasy before going to work or staying up all night, and in the end it wasn't the solution I was looking for. I moved away from that woman, the witch. It was a favour to her to get out of there because things were pretty bad. But she did shine a light on my problems. So I went in the year 2000 with my mate Steve, we went to Thailand. I'd been before, and I had a fantastic time before in Thailand. Mind you, I'd lost passports, gold chains, all sorts of shit I got into. Magic mushrooms at full moon parties. Some of it was pretty good fun. But anyway, when I went with Steve that time, I was an absolute lunatic, I was no fun at all. So he left early because he'd got robbed before I got there. Being in IT, I had to work through that year 2000 business. So I met up with him. He was already there a week before me. We went to Koh Samui. And when I got there, he said, "Look, I'm booked, I'm going home. This isn't the place for me." So he left me on my own. I was really angry with him. And I smashed up the hotel room. I was horribly drunk. I was supposed to be there for 3 weeks, but after about 5 days, I couldn't stop drinking and I couldn't eat. And it was horrible. I woke up on the floor one night and I blacked out, and I'd smashed up the hotel room. There were these big Asian ants crawling around my mouth because there was vomit all over me. I had to get a ticket to go straight home wearing adult incontinence pads on the plane. And this is the funny thing. So that's when I was with this woman, sending her all these emails about how sorry I was, and I'm going to stop and I'll make it up to you, blah blah. But when I got home, I stopped off at the club that I was drinking at in those days, the Prang Club, and I had one beer, and suddenly my whole attitude changed. The guys at the club were saying, "How was Thailand?" I'm going, "Yeah, I had a fantastic time. Went jet boat skiing, and but that one drink changed my whole attitude, and I was arrogant again." So she smelt it on me when I got home. She said, "You got to choose the booze or me," and there was no choice. I had to go with moving out and getting a place where I could drink. The Prang Club was another turning point. The Prang Club was this old, I put up a photo of it, an old sort of abandoned building in Paran. Paran was a real sort of bohemian hippie area near the unis with art students and bands, and I was living in share houses with these young guys that I met that were artists and bohemians and unemployed bums, poets, and trying to be cool with them. But I'm 40 and they're all, in their early 20s, always wearing leather pants. But anyway, I walked past this club one time and I saw the light on right at the back of the hall, so I rang this buzzer. It seemed about 10 minutes I could hear this footsteps across the dance floor, and this old guy answered, a bit like was it Riff Raff out of Rocky Horror? It had a feel like that about it. So he welcomed me in. There was about 3 or 4 old guys at the back of the pram club sitting at a bar drinking, and the pram club in its glory days, it had a doorman taking your coat, and it was but it had really fallen into disrepair, and there was hardly anyone ever went there. But I became a member. I loved it straight away. Became a member, and I could go and drink there almost every day. They knew my name, a bit like Cheers, and that was another nail in my coffin. Started to see that I was losing the plot. You could run home. So I could hardly walk most times, but I was driving down there, and that was another thing. I was getting home absolutely legless, and the person I was with was saying, how can you be driving in that state? So yeah, I got out of that. So in a way, the pram club and that lady, they got me to look at my behaviour. So I did actually go to AA when I got back from Thailand, and I think I've been once before, but I'd already had the Thailand trip booked. So, I was obstinate, and the guys at the AA were saying, maybe you shouldn't go to Thailand, maybe you need to stay here and kind of work on your problems. And I was, no, I'll be okay, I'm not going to drink. But I wasn't okay. So, when I got back, I was horribly sick and hungover, and the shame and the remorse and all that. So I did start going to AA again, and I didn't mind it, but this idea of abstinence was just terrifying to me. And was life even worth living? So a well-meaning friend, also a bass player in another band, Judge Dredd, I think they were, he said, just smoke weed, just stick to weed. You're a better person when you just smoke weed. Give up the booze and smoke weed. I've got to say, I also tried a detox at one stage. I was supposed to be in for 3 weeks, but I only lasted 5 days or 6 days or something. I went to the detox, and I thought, in my naivety, that I'll just get off the booze for a couple of weeks and then I'll never want it again. But I lasted 5 or 6 days. These emotions started coming out of me, probably, from mum's death and all that, which I'd never dealt with. But yeah, anger, loneliness, fear, anxiety, all that started coming out of me. And they were giving me diazepam, which I fell in love with as well. I thought they were the solution to my problem. But no, they weren't. But anyway, yeah. So I gave up going to AA because I was smoking weed, and I didn't want to seem like a hypocrite. I mean, I was a hypocrite, but I didn't want it to be obvious. So I was getting up there standing out, hurrah, hurrah, I'm 6 months sober, when in fact I'm still smoking weed. I've got a bong in the car, which I'll have as soon as I get out of here. I was often having busts, and I couldn't stay sober for very long. But eventually I stopped going to AA, and I switched to smoking weed. But then the goalposts widened a bit, and I included crystal meth occasionally. Anything I'd get my hands on. But I didn't drink for a number of years. So that's where we'll stop this episode. And the next episode will be how I confronted my demons and how I conquered addiction one day at a time.